general situation in the world, things which we, of course, can affect and hope to affect even more. The aim here is, of the discussion in this next hour is totally different. It's really kind of a personal striptease of one organization that you happen to be at least partially interested in, namely the World Academy of Art and Science. I concluded that most of you are interested because most of you are here, number one. Number two, the Academy is doing something which you are interested because you decided to come to this meeting. And after all, attending anyone's psychological striptease is always of some interest. So why not? Now, the title of this was supposed to be a case study. And when my daughter, and she's a psychologist, just like Gary and Alberto, looked into the title, she said, this is a very interesting thing. Who is the man who is presenting this? And of course, I said, this is me. And then of course her comment was, but you know nothing about this, how to do a case study. So of course, you know, this is where we are. So keep your expectation at an extremely low level, and I have some good features. Namely, the good feature is that, as I will show in a way, of course, to this entire course aimed toward leadership, this will be an example really of a group leadership. There was a group in the Academy that actually is responsible for all what has happened. So let's go back now to our classical triad. The triad, of course, is composed of leader, followers, and the task, right? Okay, now, in any academy, the group of leaders and followers is exactly the same thing, right? I mean, this is how the academies are made. So what are the academies? Any kind of the academy is a group of some 100 to, let's say, 1,000 highly outstanding people who think of themselves even better than anybody else thinks of them, who are very different in many ways, even in this case of one country, and much more so in the case when you have the World Academy. To give you some data on some of the academies, the average age of all national academies in Europe is above 65. Typical is 75. Okay? In the World Academy, we are considerably younger. Our average age is somewhat higher than 60. So as you see, we are on the younger side. Okay, now concentrating on the followers. And I believe it was Bertolt Brecht who wrote it, but we do know that it was said by Hitler and many others when he was totally disappointed with his followers. So what do you do in the academy when you are disappointed with your followers? What you can do is actually you simply remove them, right? And there are various ways that how this has been done. For instance, in my own country in 1941, the academy, which was at that time called Yugoslav Academy, decided when the Germans occupied us, then it was decided to kick many of them out and then introduce some new one. And then, of course, after 1945, after the end of the Second World War, then it was done the vice versa. So this process of ejecting some people is extremely powerful methodology, because what you do, you frighten those whom you expel, and you also frighten those that remain all the time, because they are all the time under the suspicions why, after all, they are there. So this is one thing that you could do. Now, in our case, of course, we could have done more or less the same thing. As a matter of fact, there has been a suggestion by a really outstanding fellow of the academy that we should, of course, start the new academy. We refused that idea because of what I will say now. What is the surroundings of the World Academy? And let me give you a couple of information about the World Academy. World Academy was established in 1960. The idea of establishing it actually lasted for about 10 years to fully give birth to the project. And so great people like Einstein were involved into that. And of course, Einstein died, and he was about 5 years old by the time that the Academy finally was founded. But his spirit was still there, and of course the spirit of all of the other people. So in that respect, the World Academy is reasonably young. How about other academies? Of course, as you know, the oldest academy is the Plato's Academy. What was the fate of the Plato Academy? And that is very important to remember. It has been actually destroyed by the Emperor Justinian. And this hatred relationship between politics and academies has always been present. The essence of politics is also always to enslave the academy and make it useful for their own purposes. Occasionally there is this deep distrust, like in the case of course, Justinian there, and several other times. On the other hand, most of the academies have been established in a period of the formation of the sovereign nation states. Though, as we said, the sovereign nation states were established at the 1648, most of them actually made its form in the 19th century with, of course, nationalist movement in most of the European countries. So you have a whole number of the academies there. However, really the beginning of the academy starts, and that's also very nice to remember. There was a group of very young people, students of Galileo, and they were by no means famous, not well-known scientists nor anything like that. And they established at the beginning of the 17th century the Accademia that is called Accademia dei Lincei. Lincei, of course, as you know, is one of those cats, not the tiger, not the lion, but actually another lynx, I think the reason is that apparently there, just like in Dalmatia, there are lynx, and the coat of arms of Dalmatia has also 3 lynx. It doesn't mean that we are directly affiliated with the Accademia dei Lincei. Now, of course, at that time, of course, this was a papal state, and in principle, at least, all Catholics could be members of that academy. Eventually, that academy in the 19th century broke into 2 parts. One, which is currently Accademia dei Lincei, belonging to Italy. And, of course, since the papal state remained without that, then they had to establish the academy which is now called the Accademia Pontificia. And the Pontifical Academy can be regarded as, and we like to regard it as a kind of the only predecessor of the World Academy of Art and Science, because it was, the idea of missionary, all world, including all the blah blah and so on. So it all made sense. Okay, so these are some of the data of the establishing. Of course, then it was the Académie Française, and it was really pushed by Richelieu. Then it was the Royal Society, and then after that there was the wave of German Academy. Germany is the only country that has more than one academy. Strangely enough, now they have decided that there will be one academy, primus inter pares, the Leopoldina, the only one actually which was the Austrian, because it was founded by the Austrian Emperor Leopold. Leopoldina is in Halle, a small city close to Dresden and Leipzig. There is also a Berlin Academy, there is Mainz Academy, and so on. So they are making an association of all of the academies. I think the Berlin Academy has been linked with Leibniz. Russian Academy has been established by Peter the Great. He was immediately interested in that, and then of course the massive influx was done by Catherine the Great, and of course famous people like Euler, for instance, a Swiss, were members of the Russian Academy. So by talking about the academies, I want really to stress out what is the surroundings of the World Academy. And the surroundings of the World Academy are, of course, national academies, and there are some 200 of them, as I said, more than 193. They are associated in various international organizations, but before coming to that, let me tell that besides, of course, the National Academy, in the 20th century, there became a group, and that parallels, you know, your description of the international organization and the fatigue of that. There is a number of European academies, Islamic academies, association of academies, and so on and so on. For instance, in Europe, we have at least 4 active academies, active to some extent, and to some extent overlapping, and so on. And then there are also association of the academies like ALEA, Association of European Academies, then Inter-Academy Panel, which is the association of all of the world academies. So this is the kind of the picture. Then, of course, besides that, there are universities. Universities are much older structure in many ways, and there are again a number of associations. And then there are a number of various international non-governmental organizations, and those that are most similar to us are the Club of Rome, established in 1968. Then there is Pugwash, established in 1955. Then there is the European Leadership Network, established very recently in 2000 and something, World Future Council, and a number of other things. Some of them are recipients of the Nobel Prize, like Pugwash, for instance, but also associations of physicians fighting for peace and so on. So this is a typical pattern of various organizations. Then, of course, while the national academies are in the interaction with 2 entities, on one side are the people of that particular country, the other is the government of these particular countries, the World Academy is a little bit more complicated because though the people are well defined, this is 7 billion, it keeps increasing, but modestly, it will reach soon 10 billion, but that's still under control. On the other hand, of course, you have this strange things which is not a global governance, which is, of course, an international body, and this is the UN structure. So, and of course, as you know, there is UN and there is the entire system of UN. And among, of course, the UN, we had particularly nice relationship for a long time with UNESCO, which was interrupted because of some stupid bureaucracy back in 1998 at the time of the Vancouver conference, where it seemed that it was very difficult to submit to UNESCO a proper account of the conference itself, you know, how much did it cost, what it do, and so on. So ever since then, so now almost 20 years, there is no good relationship between the World Academy and any of the other institutions that exist. So this is basically a kind of the description of our surroundings that we have around us, and let's see, what else did I want to tell? Yes, okay. Now we come to the second part of the description of the World Academy. Who are our members? That is maybe the first thing to see. We have about 600 members, roughly from about 80 countries. When I made this pseudo joke about changing the fellowship when you are unhappy with the fellowship, we partly did that in one way by significantly increasing the number of fellows, electing new fellows. Indeed, I think at one time after I became the fellow, then after I became the fellow 21 years ago, then I was not very pushy and eager. But then the academy, the board of trustees of the academies, actually had some thoughts of how to organize the academy. And one idea was that the academy will have an American division and the European division. And these two divisions stopped to exist. So they were thinking of inventing a good acronym. That's always very important. And the good acronym turned out to be SEED. SEED is a nice acronym. There is something that comes out of the seed and so on. So what is the SEED? SEED is Southeast European Division. So we established Southeast European Division, and what at that time they had in mind, this was just at the beginning of the 2000s, the pattern of former Yugoslavia was getting in some shape, so they thought, that would be a seed, and let's do this like the group in former Yugoslavia. Obviously, I was not very much impressed with that idea, and I said, if it is Southeast Europe, then let's be it Southeast Europe, and Southeast Europe, of course, implies Turkey, Italy, Greece, and so on. So we made all of this combination, and in order to really prove that the two deputies were one from Greece and one from Italy, and that was very important, and then we started enlarging, and then the number of fellows from Southeast Europe increased from roughly about 10 to roughly about 80, and then of course once you get your appetite, then we nominated another 100 new fellows throughout the world, so many people who are now in a board are people who actually were this first wave. Then we decided that there is another wave that is necessary. Very often, of course, when you speak of the academies, then you are faced with this age problem. All of the members of the academies being very old. And that, in a way, is wrong. Just to remind you, at the time of the famous paradigm shift in physics, a famous Russian physicist, Landau, Lev Davidovich Landau, when he met somebody physicist, he said, he's so young and totally unknown, implying that, of course, all of the physicists at that time were extremely well known. Einstein himself was young. Heisenberg was very young. As a matter of fact, Heisenberg knew mathematics so inadequately that he did not even know what he did. He did not know the matrices, so it was necessary to go and ask an old professor what that is. Schrödinger was a little bit older, but he was in his early 30s. Dirac was very young. Landau was young, and Kapitsa was young, and so on. So all of these people were very young. So the question is, what do you do with these young people? How do you connect them with the academy? And there are various ways. One way, of course, is to establish, and it has been established under the auspices of the Inter-Academy panel, the so-called Global Young Academy. That is, and the problem is actually the following problem. In order to be a member of the Global Young Academy, you have to be an active scientist, producing really a lot of scientific papers and so on, and you have to be less than 30. And then by the time you are 35, you are out of that group. So at that time, if you happen to be a member of that group, then you belong, you believe that you should be immediately elected in the academy, and this does not happen, and there is a lot of problems there. What we decided to do is actually to open two categories, one young fellow of the academy, and the other, the category of associate fellows. And at the recent meeting that we had in Podgorica of the executive committee, we decided to absolutely open much broader, so there is no limit to this number, of course, as there is no limit to the number of fellows. You know, there are academies that have strict limit. Croatian Academy has strict limit of 190, and the important thing, if you want to become a member of the Academy, is walk in front of the building to look for the black flag. If the black flag is there, there is one opening. Now we, of course, don't have this story of the flag in the World Academy. We just take this. We are not in the numerous clauses. Okay, so much about the young people, and I think we are on a right way doing that. This idea of the junior fellows, as a matter of fact, is the old idea in the Academy, started just when I was elected, though I was not as a young fellow, I was very old at that time when I was elected, but we were actually very interested in starting that, and I was the one actually who nominated one of the youngest fellow at that time. He was a docent. This is the first step of the professor at the university. He was a professor at the Faculty of Law, and at the same time he was a composer, of course, of modern music, so that was perfectly correct. We elected him. Later on, in about 2 years, he became a full member, and later on in about 10 years, he became the president of Croatia, and this year he lost the president. So you see, this is the way how you developed. This is Ivo Josipovic, and some of you met him, and some of you will meet him at the other things. Now, this is also important. As I said, we elected him when he was not a politician. He became a politician later on. The view of the World Academy toward politicians is the following. We really believe that politicians are just people like anybody else, and they can be elected. There is nothing else. You see, this is different from, for instance, the position of the Club of Rome that strictly believes if you have a political office, then your membership in the Club of Rome should be dormant. Or, for instance, the situation in one of the European academies, the European Academies of Art and Sciences, the one based in Salzburg, where they elect current presidents of the country in a position of the protector. So, Ivo Josipovic, and then also Chancellor of Austria, President of Italy, Giorgio Napolitano, and so on, are all of these protectors. We don't think that this is an interesting way. Now, of course, the very word Academy of Art and Science, or of Science and Arts, implies that it would be really very good if outstanding scientists are at the head of the Academy. And an interesting thing is that I tell you how the situation is in the World Academy. In the World Academy, and among our founding fathers, there were about 20 Nobel laureates. Most of them became Nobel laureate afterwards, not at the time of the foundation. But the very first president of the World Academy, John Boyd Orr, got a Peace Nobel Prize as the Director General of art. Later on, actually, the subsequent 10 presidents, none of them was the Nobel Prize laureate. Now, how about the other presidents of the Academy? Current president of the Royal Society is not a Nobel laureate, neither was his predecessor, Sir Martin Reid, who is an astronomer royal, nor was his predecessor, who is a mathematician, who later on was the president of Pagbash. The only that comes to mind as a Nobel laureate is the current president of Pontificia. He is a Nobel laureate, but then, of course, so that you don't have wrong ideas, though he is the president of the Pontifical Academy, he doesn't have to be Catholic, and he is not a Catholic, he is Protestant. His predecessor was a Catholic and was not a Nobel Prize laureate. So these are, these are how the academies are and what they are. Now, how the World Academy, and for that matter all the other academies, elect their leadership. just like the Club of Rome, just like the Club de Madrid, just like Pugwash, in an entirely top-down process. Or for those who are more familiar with the communist regime, just in much the same way as the Politburo elects the next president, namely within the Politburo, the decision is made, and then it goes to the Central Committee, which basically rubber stamps it. And this is the way how it's done. So in 2006, the Academy, our president, wanted to do something very, very good, and he said, let's be democratic and let us have president-elect on a basis of anyone could be candidate, any member of the Academy could become a candidate for the president, and a person could even nominate himself or herself. And that was the beginning of our trouble. And the trouble was really the following. First, out of the membership of 600, there were one who self-nominated himself, and then there was an effort to find the other one, and the other one you met here. This is our friend Bogdan Havrilishin. And then there was a question, how do you do this? You know, you have the entire world. You cannot have just like a normal, in either an academy of a country or in a country themselves, election and things like that. The only way to do this, and this likely was at that time possible, was electronic. But at what time do you stop the election? That was not all decided. It was also not decided who will actually filter the number of candidates and so on. So it was done rather, you know, in an experimental way, so to say. So we had two candidates. One was about 80 years old, the other was just below 60. One was known and well known to us. The other was totally unknown, and there was this virgin effect. Somebody who is absolutely unknown, that should be a good solution. And then at some point it was decided that we have been waiting for a long time. I believe, what was the number? About 100 voted, right? In the entire election. For the first election. Yeah, 117 voted. And it was something like, you know, the typical 60 versus 57, and it was declared enough of this. Let's call the other guy the president. And then, of course,
Bogdan voted for.
And Bogdan voted, of course. Obviously, Bogdan never was a politician. He doesn't realize that in politics you have to vote for yourself. In academia, you pretend not to vote for yourself, but in politics you always vote for yourself, because otherwise, why you are a candidate? So anyway, you know, this is how the things did. And then, of course, there is, of course, a body, the so-called Board of Trustees, which existed at that time, exists now. And while the president was elected, the Board of Trustees was really nominated by the president. So it was really kind of the situation that you have in the government, with the government being appointed by whoever gets the mandate. The argument for that is, this is the guy who is going to do the job, so let him select his own people that he can work. But then, that of course, government does a number of other things. As you all know, in most of the parliament, not all of the parliament, but in most of the parliament, a lot of legislative work really is done by the cabinet, in sense of preparing the laws and so on, and Parliament is just really a machinery, approving and having some minor discussions and so on. So, okay, more or less was like this in the World Academy, and then it had several consequences. The consequence, of course, number one was that basically they wanted, you know, they realized that the Academy somehow things are changed, there is a need to do a number of things, And the president himself did not know what the academy is. He was not a member of this academy for a long time. As a matter of fact, after about 1 year, he was elected president. He is not a member of any other national academy, so he did not know what it is. And then he started seeing, how to make the academy in his own ways. And one way was, of course, to try to make excessive control, giving all of the efforts that should be done were essentially suppressed. Just to give you an example, we were just approaching the 50th anniversary of the Academy. And it was the strong feeling of some of us that this is an event that has to be labeled. Then the first idea was, that was 2 years before, a year and a half before the 50th anniversary, was to organize a conference. Now, of course, the Academy has organized conferences anyway. To make it a special conference did not do very much. But okay, that was supposed to be the case. But then it came, the 50th anniversary, there was no conference. There was not even an outline of the conference, not even a place where we'll have the conference. Then some of us came with the idea that we should actually issue a journal. And as you know, that journal exists now, is a Cadmus journal that is actually now for 5 years regularly under Gary's leadership coming out, and each year we have 4 issues published, so it's 2 issues published. So it can, we have that, but we have Eruditio, another 2, yes. So we have 2 and 2 of these issues published. Those of you who want to get, of course, can get it easily. Cadmus is in a printed version and in the electronic version, and Eruditio is exclusively in the electronic version. And on top of that, we are regularly issuing the newsletter and even now a managerial newsletter. So all of this activity is going on, but Cadmus was the one that we wanted. And when we tried to do this at a meeting in Florence, organized by Alberto at that time, everything was done not to allow this to be launched. Then the next step was to try to see whether we could somehow see, because as I said before, all the national academies have as their counterpart on one side the government of their countries. So we tried to have the UN and tried to have the European Commission. Due to the connection that we had at that time, a lady who was in the cabinet of José Manuel Barroso, we established good contact and wanted to visit him. Again, it was said, no, we should not do. And so it was an excessive control. It was really a lot of frustration in trying to put things in order. There were documents and documents and documents being processed with about no any reason. And of course, most importantly, there was nothing. The Academy didn't do anything. And financially was in disaster. And all the time the story was, we don't have money, so we should do something about money. And we were thinking, this is the end of the term of the president, because the president had a term of 4 years, and we all believed that he will fulfill what he was saying, namely, this is the end of the Academy, let's close it, and so on. Suddenly he decided to run again, and that was a split in the board of trustees that came actually to 50-50. And so this was a moment really in which one had to act, and it turned out that it was really a small difference because one of the members that was allegedly supporting him, really his term of office was over, and but still there was a big problem whether the Academy would survive or not. As I said, at that time there were people outside of the board, but definitely influential people in the Academy that argued that we should forget about this and establish new Academy. We refused that because that would be the beginning of 2 academies. And we thought that actually what we should do is take a totally different role, a totally different way. I think it was said during today that one of the approaches was no roadmaps. We didn't have a roadmap. We just wanted to be active. So this was the important thing. The rule was also that we want to stimulate crazy idea. I was the originator of one of the crazy idea which somehow caught, and then of the other crazy idea that again caught. And the important thing was to stimulate everybody else to have crazy idea. And the only duty of the president and the board of trustees was to support everybody's crazy ideas. So that would be a good thing, you know, and then we have the action and everything was going on. So there was very little, you know, of these things really happening. As I said, we never looked back. We always were looking forward to the things that were there. We never tried to put the house in order. No cleanup, no separation, no roadmap. We decided to remain stuck with bad decisions. For instance, we have still a constitution which is far from being good, but we thought, okay, let's not waste time on that. This is an awful lot of time to actually do this. And I would say that when we look at the academy in 1911, and when we look at the academy now, it's a totally new academy in many ways. So in our lingo of the paradigm change, I think it would be fair to say that the academy accomplished a major paradigm change. We never use the word paradigm change. And by the way, of course, those of you who know the history of physics know that neither Einstein nor Bohr nor Heisenberg ever used the word paradigm change. They were working in the old ways, with the old machineries, classical physics and so on. We were doing in an old way. We have the board, we enrich this by electronic here, electronic there. Instead of meeting once in a decade, we meet 10 times in a year, and we keep people active. We decided that the important thing is to be active, but it's not that important what activity is, and so on, as long as this is so. There is still, of course, one important thing which I left out is, and yesterday when I finally, you know, the voice of my daughter came back sounding, what do you know about case study? Of course, I don't know anything. Are you really preposterous to speak about the case studies? And then I realized that, of course, as always, women are always right. Then I asked myself, what is really the task? You know, because we said leaders, followers, and there is a task. What is the task of the academy? And I said, that's easy, let me put it down. And then, of course, there is one article in the Constitution, but this is just like article, thou shalt be good, you know, and do everything for humankind and so on. But you don't really learn very much about that. So I said, okay, since I don't know what is the task, let me say what is not our task. So our task definitely is not to produce science. Why not? Because young people are doing that much, much better. You have CERN, you have any research institute, you have all associations of physicists, chemists, biologists, politicians, and so on. And so on is not the duty of the academies to produce neither research nor development. Similarly, art. You know, though artists, of course, Picasso was 100, Goethe and so on, but I mean, you cannot really put this as a demand. So, no, definitely not. Education, we cannot match any of the universities. After all, this is a much too big a chore, but we have a role in education as our World University Consortium obviously changed. should we be guiding the research and development? This was, by the way, the model, if I'm not mistaken, Alexander, in a large part of the Soviet bloc, right, where the academy was kind almost of a ministry in many ways, right? And or should the academy, which also was true partly in Croatia, run a number of the institutes? Yes, it can, but these are special institutes, Institute for Croatian Language or for something very small. You cannot have the academy run a large institute of 300-400 people. This obviously is not the right thing to do. Can we act as an advisor? This is, this is a typical pattern. Whoever was an advisor knows that this is a lousy job. I mean, it's not really a good job, so I would not necessarily like that we are doing that. In getting involved into politics, yes, some presidents of the academies wanted to get involved into politics, but this is, let me convince you, also not the proper way. Missionary, I don't know. Then I almost came with this thing and I thought, gee, why did I ever ask, why did I ever agree to speak, and then why did I ever suggest to have a case study? Then I looked into the human history and I found an example which might be exactly what the academy is ideal to do. Okay, this is I believe, 30,000 years ago. At that time, as you know, there was enough of stones, and people were playing with the stones, and this was the age called Stone Age. And there was no chance that stones will disappear. Then there was a group of people, and I will come later on to this group of people, who they are, who decided to play with a totally unattractive ore, that was not easily available. By the way, at that time, they knew already for gold. Gold was there because it's easy, shiny, and so on. So they had this other stupid ore, were playing with this, heating it, doing whatever with this. And finally, after about several hundred years, they produced the iron. So when you look who was doing that, obviously, this was not done by people in their prime, because people in their prime were supposed to act as normal people, hunter and gatherers, right? Two young people, so it was done by very young people playing, and the role of playing is the most important thing, and this was done by old people who also play and don't do anything else. So they produced the Iron Age, and by doing the Iron Age, this was a major paradigmatic change, right? So we could be actually now in something like the next phase of the Iron Age that is an ideal job for the academy. If it succeeds, fine. If it doesn't, doesn't. It takes a long time, so it guarantees the immortality of the academy for 300 or 400 years. And in that way, of course, it makes sense. It also makes old people who otherwise don't know what to do reasonably happy and engaging. And after all, it could be something coming out of that. And with this speed, it might not even take us 100 years. We might be able to do it a little bit shorter. And so now, actually, because some of you have rightly criticized our overusing the word new paradigm. And as a matter of fact, I don't know of anyone who has been not guilty of using the word new paradigm. Yes, in certain moments, you have to use certain things, like, for instance, obviously during the time of Stalin, unless you would say Stalin, or during the time of Tito and self-management, at least every third word had to be self-management, and so on. Recently it was democracy, though nobody understood what democracy is, because the American founding fathers would roll in their grave with the democracy that existed, because, just to remind you, Madison wrote a great paper about the tyranny of the majority, and obviously the voting is not the democracy. The democracy as is written in Federalist paper, is checks and balances. And how do you do the checks and balances? It's not easy, except in the game. So this once again stresses the need of the game. So actually one of the things that the Academy should be doing is playing, and that academies know how to do very well. Okay, so this was my, you see, a beautiful thing of the case study is that I'm just one of these people who have been going through this. Gary is a person who was all the time in the process. When he tells the story, it will be a very different story, there is no doubt, but still you will recognize the same characters in the story. Of course, Tibor, as a diplomat, was seeing it from abroad and will always give his wise assessment of what the Academy did. But for those of you who are just here and still not fellows of the Academy, let me just say that I believe it is really a good company, and I thoroughly enjoy my stay. And we have so many collaborating organizations, and that number keeps increasing. As a matter of fact, in the flyer that Gary is producing now, we'll have a list of these friendly sister organizations, and he's sure it is not staying on one page. We need 4 or 5 pages of these friends and admirers of the World Academies. Thank you. Now I think now we have Gary, and then we have Tibor.
Well, I think you can tell that we do have a lot of fun in the Academy, but one person particularly, you can see how much he enjoys what he's doing, and it helps us never to take ourselves too seriously. I didn't prepare anything for this session, but when Ivo reminded me that we were supposed to have a case study, and while I was listening to him, a number of lessons came to my mind that I have learned, especially in the last 3 to 5 years. And I'll just briefly mention them with reference to leadership. First thing I've learned, and I still think we're just at the tip of the iceberg, is that a network of individuals is a tremendous resource. And I would honestly say now, I think if there's such a thing as percentages, we may be tapping 1 or 2% of the potential that the Academy has, and I don't believe that, because if we really begin to tap it, we'll find it is growing exponentially, because every one of our members is connected to so many people, to so many other organizations, has so much of potential, and I'd say that we are successfully drawing on a very small part of the potential of the people who are already in the Academy, let alone others who would be willing to join. And so when we talk about leadership, the prime question for me is not that we can make the Academy great or famous, but how can we utilize this intangible structure to accomplish something of what the founders had in mind, and which we all feel is very important. And I think the potential is really not calculable. And I don't mean that specifically or only about the Academy by any means, but I think, because that's where we're working, that my goal would be to try to maximize that. And if in maximizing that, we can also help many other organizations to maximize either what they're doing with us or independently, that's our mission. But I think the potential is, we're a miniature of the society. And if we are tapping only 1% of the potential of our small organization, I'd say equally so, society, globally and nationally, is tapping only 1% of its potential. for networking, for synergy, for cooperative activity, in which case the challenges we face organizationally and as humanity are very small relative to our potential. But the learning process of how to use this thing we call organization, because my profession is working mainly with businesses, I like to think of organization as the greatest technology humanity's ever developed, more than the computer or anything else. Organization is a technology for human beings to work together. And we're really just in the infancy of learning how to do that, which means looking back a few thousand years from now, we're going to look like we really are in the Stone Age. Second thing I've seen within the Academy and in many other organizations is that there's a typical stage of inspiration when an organization is born, when it's in tune with something live in the society. And one of the challenges for any organization is to keep alive that live spark. Because organizations, like human beings, we tend to fix ourselves. We tend to develop a fixed character. But the one thing about society is it's constantly evolving. So we very quickly become obsolete simply because we stick with something of the past. I think in the Academy we had another process going on, which is very understandable. It's clear to me that the people who founded this Academy didn't do it to honor themselves or even to honor anybody else, because they were already so distinguished people. They did it because they had a real concern, a live concern that there were issues in society that weren't being addressed, that nobody was addressing at that time, and they had a responsibility as artists, as scientists, as intellectuals to try to do something about it, particularly because they came out of a number of them came right out of the nuclear age. They were responsible for creating the weapons, and they felt that responsibility. By the time I came into the Academy 20 years ago, I think pretty much people had forgotten about what the mission was, and it was just a place to be proud you're a fellow of a club. And we've tried to change back or revive that original mission, and been very difficult because a lot of people said, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to do anything. I didn't sign up to contribute anything. I thought I was just, somebody asked me if I wanted to be honored, and I'm happy to be given a world fellowship instead of a national fellowship. I added to my CV. But that clearly wasn't the original intention. And a paradigm change for us is to go back to that original mission. I've seen with companies, when they diverge from the original mission, they end up in trouble. It happened with Apple when they kicked Jobs out, though there were good reasons for kicking him out on one side, but they lost the mission. Apple went into lost its momentum for 12 years and finally recovered it after they brought him back. So I think there's a parallel there. Only thing Ivo said that I disagree with, and he will agree with my disagreement as soon as I mention it, so I'm on safe ground, is he said there was no roadmap. Actually, there was a roadmap. The one thing that the previous president did was, with the recommendation of the board, it wasn't his idea, but he agreed to formulation of a strategic plan. And Ivo and I and Winston were central to the development of that plan. In fact, it was when we created that plan, that's when all the trouble came, because there were people on the board who said, hey, this is not what we meant. Essentially what we did was we went back to the original purpose of the Academy. We asked, what do we exist for? What is our mission? Why are we doing this? And what could we be doing? And the more we talked about it, and we engaged a lot of people in the Academy, the more excited we became, because we realized we're really not performing. We're really not tapping the potential of this organization. And 3 years after that, I commented one day to Ivo, because we hadn't been doing it consciously, but when we look back, we realized, you realize for the last 3, 4 years, now it's 5 years, we're actually implementing the plan that we drew up. And it was not a conscious process. When we drew up the plan, we never thought we'd be implementing it. We thought somebody else would be implementing it. And when the crisis came, we never thought anybody was going to implement it at all. So I think the power of a roadmap. We did have a roadmap. It was a collective vision, and it's still unfolding. Last year, we founded the World University Consortium, and when I went back and looked at the plan, I saw it was in the annexure back in 2008 because it was in the annexure in 1960 when they drew up the original idea. So when I started out on the Tuesday morning, I mentioned this idea of energy conversion. And I think the Academy as a case study is an example of a work in process, certainly, but an organization that had become dull, encrusted. We had lost our aspiration. We'd forgotten the aspiration. We'd lost our direction. We had no functional organization. And what we've done is we've tried to make this into a living organization, not by controlling it, not by fixing boundaries, not by distributing authority. There was authority over nothing. There was nobody doing anything, so what's the idea of authority? Empowering people, empowering ourselves and everybody else who was willing, and then trying to develop a structure, and we did it, I think, intuitively, not with any great vision of how. And it's been very difficult, very experimental, trying to find the right type of structure to work internally with other members who are not paid. Most of us are not even paid when we travel, or all of us are not even paid when we travel. So we do this at our own expense. We do it because we want to. It's in the real sense a coalition of the willing, which is the term coined for what will be the future of global governance, because there's no way to compel nations to limit their sovereignty or to give themselves to a larger whole. In terms of, we had an ideal of democratization. It sounded really great. I think we found what every idealistic leader finds, that democracy sounds great in principle, but is extremely difficult to manage. Democracy means that anybody can stop something, but you can't compel anybody to do anything, and that's really been the case for us. So we've tried to involve as many people as possible. I would say it's very difficult to involve people. It's very difficult to get, you have to find the people who really are inspired and let the rest do what they want. And we've spent a tremendous energy trying to communicate with our members and get more and more of them. And that one of the reasons we've been opening up the membership to so many more is because we realized that so many of our existing fellows didn't have the aspiration, don't have the intention, and we'd be wasting our time in trying to compel them. In my model of this energy conversion, the last step is you have to have the right knowledge and skills. And for me, it's been a tremendous growth experience. And I've learned a lot of things. One of the most important thing I've learned is when you think you know something that's valuable to share with other people, the only thing that works is to shut up and try to listen to other people and find out what they have and what they know that's valuable. And it took me a long time to learn that when you have a good idea, the best thing is to try to find the good ideas in other people. And that works. And therefore, I think we've created an atmosphere in the Academy where we really welcome good ideas from other people. This type of activity, unstructured to a large extent, unplanned, bringing a large group of different people together and listening to different viewpoints rather than saying, here's the line we all have to follow. That's within the Academy. External to the Academy, I think we've also attempted, and I would say with very limited success so far. I'm happy about the successes, but very limited. Ivo mentioned a proud long list of organizations we've collaborated with, but it's not been easy. We took the view, we're trying to take the view, I don't say we're fully succeed, that it doesn't matter who gets the credit, it doesn't even matter who gets the money or who does it, what matters is that something gets done. And so when we started this new paradigm, we invited a dozen organizations to join in, to share, to help develop the agenda. And of course, every organization has its own mission, has its own priorities, has its own limitations and all. But I think so far we haven't really learned, with a few exceptions. We've done pretty well with Club of Rome, primarily, I think, just because so many of us are also members of the Club of Rome. There's such a, we have about 1/3 of the Club of Rome members are here too. So we can draw on each other, and in the previous, under previous Director, Secretary General of the Club of Rome, I think we did very well. They were really a stimulus to us, and we've tried to be a stimulus to them. But I think overall I haven't learned how to make this effective yet, how to make this coalition of organizations effective, even when we think or tell ourselves, look, we're trying to be egoless about this, we're really trying to, but we haven't learned it yet, and maybe that's something others can help us with. I know we're running way out of time. I'm just going to end then by the theme of this, leadership and thought that leads to action. Because one thing I have really become convinced about through our effort is that ideas have tremendous power. And we all want to see changes on the ground. We all want to see changes in our institutions. We all want to see changes in policy. But the whole rationale for our new paradigm and what we're doing now in the Academy is we've traced it all back and are convinced, I'm fully convinced, that the root cause of our problem is at the level of the very thoughts on which our actions and our institutions are based. And therefore we have to go back and challenge things at the basic level, look at them at first principles. And I think we are not a field organization, we're not a lobbying organization. There are many things we are not qualified to do. I think if we have any place where we can be effective is let us really look at the ideas that are needed to generate better results in future. And let's bring together anybody from within or outside the organization who can help us and share with us the process of a clearer formulation of the ideas that we need for a global New Deal, which I like that phrase very much. Thank you. Tibor?
Yes, I feel that I'm accidentally here on this platform, number one. Number two, let me confess that I've had a feeling that I am accidentally belonging to the Academy. And
you are a just young fellow.
Let me first of all say that I'm not as young as the reference might mean. The accidental presence of mine in the Academy might be interesting for this case study, and let me describe how it started and where it ended up. And I must say it started with being annoyed by the Academy, and I will explain why I was annoyed by the Academy, and then why I have more and more appreciation for what the Academy is doing and for the people who are in the Academy. So the story of mine started with a mutual invitation because Ivo invited me to Zagreb for a talk, and I invited Ivo to a science and technology conference my former organization brought together. And in that conference, it was a good setting for discussions. We were exploring things like education, and it was a couple of years ago, so massive open online education, MOOC, was at that time something unusual for international organizations, and we were happy push the barriers as an organization, and big meetings like this Science and Technology Conference was around 1,000 scientists in nuclear test ban and monitoring technologies. So this is how our relationship started, and I was invited to join the academy as a fellow. The annoying element came not from these nice meetings, but when I came across through newsletters and from the publications, electronic publications, of some of the things which I thought we as an organization, we were pioneering and pushing forward, and I could see that there are other organizations like World Academy who is equally good in it. And one was the education, and I was a bit annoyed, gosh, we are not alone pushing the barriers. And then, of course, I didn't pay enough attention, I must admit, to some of the publications, but when I saw this educational effort, I pulled out the electronic version of the Cadmus, and later I received the Cadmus, and I saw an article on externalities, and you might have heard I'm a bit obsessed with externalities, and there was an amazing article about externalities in a Cadmus publication, so I was annoyed again. But this annoyance, which I admit it's a competitive characteristic of mine, led to pay more attention to what the academy was doing, and I was more a sleeping fellow than a real fellow for some time. And then I went through the history of the academy, and in the history of the academy, I went to some of the early speeches from the 1960 establishment and some of the 1960 references. I came across names for which I have a big heart. I'm from Hungary, so for me, names like János von Neumann and Eugen Wigner and Leo Szilárd, all of them had to leave Hungary for reasons we understand. So these are resonating differently. And when I saw the name of János or Johann von Neumann and Eugen Wigner in the context of the academy, I started to pay much more attention to what the academy has been doing historically and what the academy is doing recently. My personal obsession is more with Leo Szilárd, who, by the way, deserved probably two Nobel Prizes, one of the real Nobel Prize and the second one is a Nobel Peace Prize.
Right, both of them.
For what he did on patenting practically the chain reaction and the first reactor with Fermi for $1, which they got for the patent. And what he did in the 1960s to lobby for a good cause, to trying to push the nuclear genie back in the bottle. And 3 days ago, I was sitting in the main conference room of the Italian Liceo. There was a conference in Rome, and when you see in a setting like that, you have the Fermi on a picture up on the wall, and then across the street, this is the Trastevere district of Rome. You have this amazing villa with the frescoes of Raphael. You understand how insignificant you are, and how big are the shoes of amazing people from art and science. And you appreciate more even the possibility of sitting in the same room where those people used to stay, or belonging to the same organization where some of these people have been working. You appreciate more the opportunity given to you that even if you have some of the playful ideas or whatever ideas, there is a setting where you can display them. So this is when, after being annoyed by the academy, I started to appreciate the academy, and I am still asking the question, what the hell I am doing and what the hell we are doing, but we got a clear instruction from Ivo exactly what we have been doing and what we are to do here. So I'm very much relaxed now after his talk that we are flying with the right autopilot.
Iron Age, no Stone Age.
What I would like to say is that there are big shoes of the predecessors of the shepherds of this organization and arrangement. So it will be interesting to see how, in a playful way, it might work out. My notion of caution is for presidents and emeritus presidents. I think around 5 years before Einstein came forward with the theory of relativity, Lord Kelvin, the president of the Royal Society, famously said that practically everything has been invented in physics and it's just a matter of filling in some of the things. And then Einstein came with his disruptive idea. And then in the memoirs of Leo Szilard, you find a reference how the bug was put in his head on the nuclear chain reaction. And the bug was put in his head while crossing a street in London, where he saw a reference to a talk of Lord Rutherford, who was in 1932 the president of the Royal Society. And Lord Rutherford said that thinking about splitting the atom and getting energy is moonshining. So this is where seemingly Leo Szilard became a bit inspired how to prove that it's possible. So the presidents will have to be very careful and very measured with their projections about what is possible for the future. And I wouldn't stop at the Iron Age. Thank you so much.
Okay. We don't have much time, but maybe brief.
No, we really don't have time. We're already
Yeah.
7 minutes
We are
over, and
over time.
we don't have time for that.
Should we go for brief coffee? But please bring the coffee. Bring the coffee here. Yeah, so that we can do this. You know.
Our plan.
Yeah. The idea about here, you know, referring to leadership in thought, you know, the idea was the academy is worth having, and the action is let's have it. You know.